Hello, Orlando Ruiz Jr. Thanks for hanging out. Appreciate it. Another on-the-go review. As you can see, I'm in my car, so taking a little lunch break. Thought I'd take some time to talk about The Godfather Part III, the black sheep of the trilogy. Now, the first two are a couple of the greatest films ever made. And this came out about 16 years after the second film. I'm not sure if anyone was really expecting this film to come along. It feels like this was something that was pushed by the studio mainly because Francis Ford Coppola has gone on record saying he had no desire to make a third film. But in the end, there was one, and some people wish there hadn't been. But for the most part, I think the story we got is actually quite enjoyable. Much like the first two films, it's an epic story. The introduction takes place at this big family event, much like in the first two films. So you pretty much have all the same themes going on as far as a family struggling to maintain. And of course, Michael Corleone is a little older and is in a different place in his life, a different place mentally. He is not with Kay anymore. They have gone their separate ways. Diane Keaton is great once again in the role of Kay. Unfortunately, no Robert Duvall. That's one of the big gaping holes as far as something that feels like it's missing. You know, Tom Hagen is nowhere to be found in this movie, unfortunately. But we do have a nice addition with the inclusion of the character of Vincent, who is played by Andy Garcia, who very much deserved his Best Actor Supporting nomination, Best Supporting Actor nomination that he got when this came out. And when this came out, Al Pacino, much well deserved, got a couple of nominations, though he didn't win that year in 1990 for the Oscars. He was nominated for this, and deservedly so. I think he should have won it, to be honest, but you know, it doesn't always happen. And that year, he was also nominated for Dick Tracy. So this was Pacino, really, I think, at the height of his acting game. And though The Godfather 3 is, Part 3, is not a favorite among fans, I think some of his best acting ever is in many scenes in this film. And the end of the film definitely has one of my favorite Pacino scenes of all time. And of course, I'm not going to spoil this for anybody that is coming into this trilogy for the first time and watching these one at a time for themselves for the first time. But yeah, I just want to give you my overall thoughts in terms of what I take away from this third film. This is a movie that I don't sort of shy away from. Like many people, I actually enjoy this movie. I enjoy its structure. Its structure is very much in the same sort of style as the first film. And yeah, the character of Mary Corleone does sort of hold this movie back from being as great as it could have been. And maybe the incest in the film, slight spoiler, maybe that's something that audiences could have done without. Maybe some people, you know, just didn't want to see that kind of thing. To me, it doesn't really bother me. I mean, it's not like it's anything graphically depicted in the film. You know, there's a couple that shares an on-screen kiss. They happen to be related. So, you know, and it's implied that they're carrying on a relationship, but the relationship really adds stakes to this film, especially in the third act. And of course, you know, this coming out 16 years later after the second movie, you do feel that some time has gone by and this feels more like an early 90s, late 80s film. So in that regard, it's not going to have really the same vibes as the first two films, you know, the first two being 70s classics. But for a film that came out as a sequel to one of the greatest of all time, one of the greatest films of all time in The Godfather Part II, you know, the expectations that people must have had for this, you know, must have been impossible. And I don't see how this could have ever met those expectations, just considering what this movie had to follow up. So yeah, I don't look at this as something that's inferior. Just, you know, even though it is, but I still consider it part of the main story. All these films are really just one giant movie. And the third one is just the weakest, but it's still a very good film. You know, just the Mary Corleone casting, you know, if that had been changed, it would have definitely affected the outcome of the entire thing. But regardless, the film is strong enough with the performances that are there. You got Pacino and Andy Garcia really do hold the film together. And then on top of that, there is a story here that is very engrossing in terms of the family just trying to maintain and stay, keep it together, basically, keep it from falling apart, which is something that Michael was struggling to do in the second film. And, you know, this is a Michael Corleone that is definitely a reckoning with a lot of things from the past, a lot of the sins from the past. And a lot of that comes to play in this film. So there's definitely an evolution to the character of Michael. And, you know, that's very apparent in that first film. And, you know, in the second film, he descends into a sort of dark place. So, you know, this is, you know, later in his life when he's sort of looking back on everything retrospectively and making different choices, especially towards the middle and third part of the third act of the film. Yeah, this isn't a guy who wants to be a gangster anymore or is looking out for retribution. You know, he's not seeking to wipe out all his enemies. You know, he's, like I said, he's in a different place, and it really adds a lot more drama to the family dynamic, because with the Vincent character played by Andy Garcia, you have somebody that's up and coming, sort of rising, very much the way Michael did in the first Godfather. So it's interesting to see just the similarities and the ties there. There's definitely a lot that these two have in common, though Vincent has a lot more in common with the character played by James Caan in the first film, personality-wise, character-wise, and rightfully so, given who he's playing in the film. I don't want to spoil any of that. You should find out for yourself upon viewing this, but this is a worthy entry. It's still, in my opinion, a very good Godfather film. Of course, it's not up to par with those first two, but those first two, like I said, they're some of the greatest films ever made. So, you know, this one, it's not terrible, but yeah, there's some acting in there that a lot of people could do without, considering how great most of the performances are. You will notice when you see a subpar performance in this, it's a little cringy at times, but it serves its purpose. It, you know, it adds to other performances, mainly Pacino, who elevates those around him, even those that are weaker in the acting department. So, yeah, this is a very worthy entry. Still not, of course, on par with the second or the first, but definitely a must-watch. When this came out, this was very much a critically acclaimed film. It's not like this came out and this was just dismissed by critics and audiences. No, this was a movie that was nominated for many Academy Awards, including the big categories. Best Picture ended up losing to Dances with Wolves. But, you know, had this movie been, I guess, not showed up by that film, I still think it shouldn't have gotten that Best Picture Oscar, because personally, I feel that the movie that should have won that year should have been Goodfellas, but, you know, too late to rewrite history, too late to get into the Academy and you know, vote for that film. Not that I ever would, not that I ever could, but, you know, it was Goodfellas. I don't know how did that movie lose to Dances with Wolves? I don't know. Maybe because it was about criminals, and Dances with Wolves was a frontier, you know, type of Western story that was, I guess, well, people fell in love with that movie. People loved Kevin Costner back then. But yeah, 1990, great year for mob movies. You know, Goodfellas and Godfather 3. And yeah, Godfather 3 snuck in there, but deservedly so. Like I said, still an Oscar-worthy movie in my opinion. Maybe not worthy of the Oscar win, but, you know, still a worthy sequel. Check it out. This is definitely one of those films that has its fair share of haters, but I think there are also people out there that recognize this film as the worthy addition to the saga that it really is. You know, Francis Ford Coppola, his stamp is all over the film in terms of his direction, his style. Once again, you have a great music score. You know, that Godfather theme always sort of just sucks you in the moment it starts. And, you know, Talia Shire as Connie is even more, she's even more of a presence in this film. They sort of give her a different type of role in this one, and it's fun to watch, actually. Her character isn't quite the same as it was, so it's nice to see people evolve and change in these movies. And yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. This is definitely a must-watch, though, if you're a fan of Al Pacino, if you enjoy a good gangster film. Like I said, not on the same level as the first two, but a worthy addition nonetheless. And if you can't find it on streaming, you know, whether it's Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime, if you're having trouble finding it on Peacock, yes, Godfather 3. There's the Blu-ray, there's Al Pacino. As you can see, he's a little older, little makeup and gray-haired. It's funny, I remember when this came out, after this came out, people were like, what happened to Al? Because he looks significantly older in this film. And then, you know, a couple years later, oh, crap, he's in Son of Woman, Carlito's Way. What? Oh, he looks younger. What, did he get some work done? But no, it was just a good makeup job. They really made a convincing job of making him look quite older in this film. But yeah, great performances overall. Once again, Francis Ford Coppola kills it in the directing department. Just a couple little weaknesses there that if you get past those, you know, enough to see through to the story that's being told there. Very much an enjoyable watch. So appreciate you hanging out for a little bit. And until next time, be sure to like, subscribe. Sorry, Sylvia. She's always making sure I say that correctly. And, you know, hit that bell, you know, share, comment, and be on the lookout for more of these reviews. Got much more on the way. So until next time, thank you very much and peace.